Welcome to this week's episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm. This week, we hear from CJ Cox, the corners coach at Kent State, as he shares how coaching many positions has benefited him, how he found his voice as a young coach, and where he has seen the most growth throughout his career. But first, a word from CoachComm.
Deuce left, check with me. If they're in quarters match, we're going to Pittsburgh or Ohio.
They're in zero.
Let's go Hippo, Seattle, wide choice. If we call the protection right, it's 6.
When a play call is the difference between winning and losing, your headset choice could be your most important decision. When the call counts, CoachComm is the only choice for clear, dependable communication. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
We got it, guys. Good job.
Now, let's get inside the headset with Coach Cox.
Coach Cox, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great. How about yourself? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing good, man. Always a pleasure to have a ball coach on. I know finding 30 minutes to spend with me is not always high on the priority list, but I appreciate you making some time, man.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. It's always high on my priority list.
All right, man. Well, hey, let's kind of dive into this thing. So, one of the interesting things I saw when I was, doing some research on you and your career and all that kind of stuff was that you were, a poli-sci major. Now, I don't think there's a college football coaching major. Most guys kind of all have some random assortment of majors, but that poli-sci is obviously a semi-difficult degree, all that kind of stuff. So I didn't know if maybe you going into college you had a different plan as far as your profession, but when did you find out you want to be a ball coach, and why did you choose that poli-sci route?
Yeah, I actually went to college as an architecture major. And that's how I started off. And then, there were a couple of discussion classes that took place on the weekends. You had to go on Saturdays and Sundays. My freshman year, I played as a true freshman, so I wasn't able to make those. So it was hard for me to get that degree in that program. So then I transitioned to political science. And then from there, my plan was to join the FBI. And that's what I really wanted to do. I was steadfast in that. And my last year playing football, I medically disqualified. So I had nerve damage in my neck. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. Our head coach at the time, Coach Bobby Howe, asked me if I ever thought about coaching football. And I hadn't. And he said, I'll tell you what, why don't you stick around, be a student assistant, help out with the defensive line, and see if that's something that you're interested in. And then I did that, and I fell in love with it. And from there, became a graduate assistant and moved on and became a full-time. And I can't imagine myself doing anything else other than what I'm doing right now.
That's crazy how it works out, man. Well, it's definitely a blessing to have you in the profession. I'm happy the coaching profession chose you and you chose it. Now, you made mention about, Coach giving you this opportunity to join the staff as a student assistant, and that leveraging to a graduate assistant, and actually leverages into another position, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But you talked also mentioned your playing days. You played running back. You came in there as a running back. Had the injury. You played a little bit of defense. So you played at this point running back, linebacker. You get some opportunities between your student assistant and graduate assistant to coach the D line and work with the offensive line, right? And then you're heavily involved with the special team phase, both as a player, I imagine, and as a coach. Just having touched that many phases of the game and that many position groups in such a small span, what do you feel like that kind of has done for your career? And, how eye-opening was that for you as a player who probably thought he knew everything about the game and realized you didn't know quite as much as you thought?
Yeah, I think it allows you to see the game from a holistic point of view. I think that, my first year I got a chance to work with the defensive line and special teams. Second year I got a chance to work with the offensive line and work with the running backs as well. My last year I was a linebacker GA. And it just gave me an opportunity to, really take in what exactly the offense is trying to do or how they're trying to attack coverages, having a better understanding of the run game, what runs they like versus different, fronts and blitzes and how to identify pressures. Same thing defensively. Now I know, in terms of the depth of the receivers and their routes and what the offense is trying to run in terms of like whether it be power or gap schemes, all those different things and how to handle those and, get +1 in the box and all those different things. And really special teams is, to me, it's one of the utmost important things in terms of winning the ball game. Like you have to be sound and dominant in terms of special teams. And I think Coach Halk at UNLV is one of the top special team coaches in the country. Did a really nice job of bringing me along and helping me understand that. So it just allowed me to become a better football coach.
Yeah.
And I think it just makes you that much more valuable when you understand all three phases.
Yeah, and we're going to kind of hit this thing chronological here, but I will jump into you currently as a coach here in 2023. Secondary coach, defensive pass game coordinator at Kent State. How did that experience? I know like every last day and every last second probably may not apply, but how did that experience help you be a better coach today in terms of just that general understanding and getting it, kind of like a water hose, a fire hose so fast and so early?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to just having a good understanding of ball, and if you have a good understanding and you know it well enough, then you can teach it. And if you can teach it, I think all coaching is teaching. So again, it kind of goes back to, you play running back and you play linebacker, you coach this position and that position, but it allowed me to become a better coach and a better teacher.
Yeah.
So it just helped me along the way to get our kids to perform at a high level.
Yeah, and in just to beat that question a little bit further, you also got to sit in 4-5 different rooms at this point in time between your running backs coach, linebackers coach, your offensive line, defensive line full-time coach, and the special teams coordinator. So you also got to see a lot of teaching styles and ways guys approach kids, and probably, I think every kid is coached differently, and I'm sure you would agree. But sometimes those positional groups are also coached a little differently. When you kind of look at it wholesale, it's all a little bit of a finesse to how you coach these position groups. So I'm sure you got to see some of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like as you mentioned, the O-line's a little bit different than the linebackers.
Right.
But also like getting all the different teaching styles too. It's like with coaching, we all take a little bit of, we take a little bit from the coaches that we've been around as we go through our profession, as we take those leaps and bounds, and you kind of create something that's your own. Mm-hmm. And, whether it be our O-line coach, our linebackers coach, our D-line coach, and like, okay, I like the way he started his meeting off here. I like the way he kind of made this meeting interactive, kept the guys engaged by answering questions on each and every snap, on each and every clip. So it just allowed me to, again, become a better teacher, I knew how I wanted to run my room once I got that opportunity. And when I got that opportunity, I was ready to go and I was prepared for it.
Yeah. And so all this time we kind of discussed so far is you've been a student assistant, like obviously your playing career a little bit, and then you've been a graduate assistant, but you stick around UNLV for another year. You're promoted to a full-time role, director of player personnel, and I believe over some of the recruiting operations. Number one, it's a relatively young guy. Why were you the guy they picked to put in such an important role? And that director of player personnel is so different at every campus. So, I talk a little bit about what you were doing and why you were the guy that they picked to do that.
Yeah, I think, it was 2015. I was the defensive GA working with the linebackers, and I know Coach Sanchez at the time was looking for somebody to come in and be the director of player personnel. And we actually went through the season without one. And, I just worked hard and did the best that I could in the position that I was given. And, just try to be great where my feet were. And I know Coach was looking for a young, director of player personnel that would provide energy, and who would work hard. And he decided to go with me because I was already in the building. And then I got a good endorsement from our defensive coordinator, Ken Bear, at the time, and said that I would do a great job at it. I did have some experience with recruiting, obviously when kids come up on campus, right, and get a chance to connect and link with their parents and the recruits themselves. So I had an opportunity to do that, and I did a good job in that aspect for sure. But, I was actually walking off the football field after practice, and Coach Sanchez offered me the job, and I said, absolutely, I'm all in. I wanted to stay in Las Vegas because that's where I met my wife. That's where I played. It was my alma mater. So it was an opportunity for me to stay in Las Vegas a little bit longer. And so it was a no-brainer for me. And you know how it is. You know, you're trying to find your first full-time job.
Yeah.
And sometimes that first full-time job doesn't come right away. So, and I took it, and I love every bit of it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like you're searching around for this first full-time job, and oftentimes, just my flashback to being early in my career, it's like sometimes it's a little delusional in a good way, right? You're hoping that you're gonna get the wide receiver job at Dallas Cowboys or something like that for the first gig. Typically, doesn't work out that way. But you are trying to be strategic and all these types of things. Was there any concern about this off the field from an X and O standpoint role that you were taking?
Absolutely. I did worry about that. But I also felt that if I did a good enough job in whatever position that I got there at that time at UNLV, that maybe I would parlay that position into a full-time role on the coaching staff. So it was kind of a win-win for me, just being able to stay where I was at. I was at UNLV. My wife was the assistant director of compliance at the time. So we got a chance to stay where we were. And if I got an opportunity to be a full-time coach at UNLV, great. If another opportunity came about, then I would take that job. So I was good no matter what I felt. But I know as I went through when I was director of player personnel and I wasn't coaching, I wasn't doing something that I loved. It was time to start looking so I can get back on the football field for sure.
I'm kind of chuckling in the back of my mind here because you slipped this in there very casually, but the director of recruiting and the assistant director of compliance, that's a unique relationship there. So you were able to kind of get some scoop on rules and things like that from the wife. That's awesome, man. Well, you're able to take this. You're able to get on the field. Now, obviously, you mentioned been at your alma mater, meeting your wife there. I know how it is. All these different places you go, a lot of them are special for all their different reasons, whether it's the reasons you mentioned or something else. But you get an opportunity to get back on the field there at Sacramento State. Just talk a little bit about how that came to fruition, how you ended up taking that job and getting back on the football field.
Yeah, I was actually preparing for. I want to say it was a recruiting function. Either it was like a recruiting function or we had our newcomers coming in. I was focusing on that, and our head coach comes in and he's like, "Hey, the head coach at Sacramento State is going to give you a call. Just be prepared to answer the phone." Like, okay, sounds good. It was Coach Jody Sears. I was going to give me a call, and Coach Sanchez knew that I wanted to get on the football field. And we had those discussions. The nice thing about Coach Sanchez was that he allowed me to go into his office and he would ask me, "What do you want to do?"
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, where do you see yourself here in the next 5 years? And it wasn't just, "Hey, I see you as director of player personnel," and that's it. He knew I wanted to coach. So he did everything he could to help me get back on the football field. And I know Coach Sears reached out to him and said, "Hey, we're looking for a young coach who can coach cornerbacks." And obviously I got the endorsement from Coach Sanchez, and Coach Sears gave me a call. Surprisingly enough, I actually interviewed with Coach Sears in 2014 for the running backs job, and I didn't get it. And it kind of worked out, and he gave me a call. He said, "Hey, CJ, I still got your number saved from 2014." And we talked about the job, and it was a great opportunity. And I went home and I talked to my wife and said, "Hey, what do you think about it?" And she said, "Let's go." We were full speed ahead. And by that June, I was in Sacramento coaching the cornerbacks.
That's awesome, man. Just side note, Jody Sears was my position coach my freshman year in college. I played for him at West Point. I played corner for him. So I know all about old Coach Sears. Yeah, that's my guy. But now I'm happy I'm happy that played out the way it did because it was a question I wanted to ask and I missed it, and I probably wasn't going to be able to go back. But you mentioned something that allows for me to ask the question. How you had the conversation? You kind of said Coach Sanchez was a good dude in regards to bringing you to the office, talking about, "Hey, what's next? What are you looking for out of this deal?" Yada yada yada. Every coach is not going to do that, and I'm sure you recognize that. And as there are a bunch of young coaches are on, and man, I'll be honest. I've had a lot of calls from guys faced with these type of opportunities to step off the field, take a little bit better job, maybe make a little bit more money, and then they still have the itch to be on the field and they don't know how to approach it with their coach, this, that, or the other. How important is that conversation to have? Even if your coach is the one orchestrating it.
Yeah, I think you want to have that open line of dialogue with your head coach, just because, let's say something comes about and he knows about an opportunity, but you never express to him that, hey, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to be. These are my plans. This is my 5-year plan. So when that opportunity comes about, he can say, hey, I got somebody right here in this building that would do a great job. If he doesn't know that, he's not going to think about you. Then you're going to be out of sight and out of mind. He thinks you're good right where you're at. And I always wanted Coach Sanchez at the time to know that I do want to get back on the football field, and he knew that, and obviously it worked out. But even now, it's talking to your head coach and just saying, like, having those candid conversations, like, these are my goals, and I just think it's really important for them to know that.
Yeah. Well, at this point in time, this is 2017. You're a few years out from playing, but you actually have put together a decent resume at this point in time. But this is your first time having your own room, having your own responsibilities. If that corner's getting beat on, it's on you. All that kind of stuff that kind of comes along with being the guy that's leading the room. What were some of the learning curves that you had to have actually having your own room at that point in time?
I think the main thing that I learned that year is understanding that the guys, they lean on you and they go as you go. And you always talk about responding the right way and having a great response, having a quality response no matter what happens throughout the game. And you can't wear your emotions on your sleeve. So I want to say it was the first couple of games, and you know how it is. You're a ball coach and something doesn't go the way you want it to and you get upset. But those guys are looking to you for that answer, and just understand that you have to be even keeled no matter what, and you keep chopping wood. And again, when they look to you, they're looking for confidence, and they're looking for that answer. And if you keep a level head and you give them that answer and you give them that confidence, they'll typically respond the right way. And that's something that I really learned that first year, just knowing that each and every day, whether you go into a meeting and you're installing new coverage, if you install that new coverage with unbelievable energy and you're enthusiastic, those kids are going to buy into that coverage.
Yeah. And
they're going to execute at a high level. It's all about your energy and your attitude, again, because you have to be that shining example for them. And, you know, again, they are a reflection of you.
Absolutely.
So, and that's something that I truly learned.
Now, from an X and O standpoint, you know, at this point in time, you play running back, you play linebacker, you were in O-line, D-line room, and you were linebackers GA, and then all of a sudden you step off the field. You're recruiting, though, and you're involved. You know the game. I don't question that by any means. But, you know, now all of a sudden your first gig, your first room, this is the first time you've really been around this position at that point in time. Maybe played a little bit when you were younger or something like that. But, you know, how did you go about preparing yourself, you know, to be knowledgeable at that position and you know, and pour that knowledge into those young guys?
Yeah. It's funny. So actually, I was director of player personnel for a year and a half. During that year and a half, although I was still doing recruiting and handling everything on the home front with our kids, I would still go to the linebacker meetings and the defensive back meetings.
Oh, good.
So no matter what, even though I was doing director of player personnel, if I got 45 minutes to an hour and 30 just to pop in a defensive staff meeting or pop in a position meeting, I was still going to those. And I would still stay engaged as much as I could because, again, I knew that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And so when I got that opportunity, our cornerbacks coach at the time, David Lockwood, spent 2 hours at the end of the workday before I went to Sacramento, and he just helped me it was about like 2 weeks, 2 hours after every workday, just to kind of make sure that I had like the basic fundamentals of defensive back play. And it's always about people that truly pour into you as you go through your journey or you get to where you're at. There's people that take time to make sure you're good and you're well off before you go on and you take over your first full-time gig or your first room. And so he definitely poured into me to make sure I was good to go. But I always stayed engaged. I always went to those position meetings and the defensive staff meetings just to make sure I stayed sharp.
Absolutely, man. Well, that's awesome. I love that you mentioned. Would you say coach's name again? The one that developed you a little bit there. What was
David Lockwood.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome that some of those guys will do those types of things for you, and hopefully you can continue to pay it forward. Which you were itching to get on the podcast and share your story, and this would be helpful to somebody out there, man. Just kind of going through that. So, man, I just love the profession for that. So, after this 1 year at Sac State, you end up having some, reunite with Coach Houck at the University of Montana State. How did that opportunity kind of come about, though? I know you know him. I know you had a relationship, but how did everything kind of fall into place for you to go there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, University of Montana. If you say Montana State, Coach Houck will kill you.
Did I say Montana State?
You did.
Oh, my goodness, man. I got it written down, and I typed in Montana State on my notes, and then I deleted it to make sure I had it right. I do it all the time, man. Thank you for correcting me.
It's all good. It's all good. So, but no, it was I knew Coach Houck was going to be up for the job when it opened up, and I actually got the phone call, I want to say it was a couple of days after Christmas, and just asked me if I would still be willing to come up to Missoula. And I said, yes, sir, absolutely. And it was an opportunity that I could not refuse because it was, if you go back to how it all began and who got me in this profession and who actually, had that conversation today, have you ever thought about coaching? I think you would be great. And it kind of came full circle.
Yeah.
And, just getting back up to Missoula and being on that staff, our offensive line coach was somebody that was around when I was 19 years old. Our running backs coach, somebody I've been close with for, quite some time. Our tight ends coach is there now. He was my offensive coordinator at UNLV. And all these guys saw me grow up from a teenager to, I want to say I was 28 years old when I was at the University of Montana. And it was more than just a job. It was getting back around family and really good people.
Yeah.
And that's the most important thing for me. So just, when you're talking your wife into taking a new job and like, hey, honey, this is a great opportunity. But she also knew the people that we were going to be around each and every day. If you can work around good people, then you're really not working. You're just going to a building and hanging out with friends and talking ball and trying to win a couple of ball games. That's really what.
Yeah, and I definitely want to share when we've had Coach Houck on here, and I did get University of Montana right, so that was a good thing there. But yeah, we've had him on a podcast. He was here actually a couple months ago here in Waco for the board of directors meeting. Man, fantastic dude, fantastic guys that he's around. But you may mention some of that dialogue that you have with your wife, and then you also got this extreme temperature change. You're going from Sacramento to Missoula, and all of a sudden that's when the career, in my opinion, really starts getting real, when you're making these bigger moves and and having these tough discussions and having to go in and talk with Coach Sears. And so I did want to kind of talk about that. How did you go and address that with Coach Sears at that point in time? I don't know if that's when he was let go or not, but yeah, how did that go down?
Yeah, so we finished up the season at Sacramento State. We were 7-4.
Okay.
And just missed the playoffs to beat UC Davis for the Causeway Classic, and it was a great year.
Yeah.
And I just called Coach Sears and I said, Coach, I'm going to take the job at Montana just because I'm going to go work for one of my mentors and somebody that I know, I love, and I trust. And I'm just gonna take this opportunity. And he understood. He was good. Yeah. He was really good about it. And there was no bad blood or anything like that. Actually, Coach Sears came up and hung out with us for 2 or 3 days.
Oh yeah.
After they got let go at Sacramento State, so it was good to reconnect and do all that because our offensive coordinator at Montana, Coach Rosie, he's good friends with Jody Sears.
Okay.
Yeah, so it worked out, but I knew Coach Sears he was great. He was understanding, and he said, "Okay, but if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know." And And that was that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes those conversations are hard, and sometimes they're
No
smooth.
doubt.
And I try not to ever judge anybody on their feelings on those situations. All coaches love to lose a good coach, and sometimes their reaction is not the best. But it's just a part of the business, having some of those tough conversations like that. Now, just in a nutshell, man, if you can kind of reflect, I just want to dissect 3 years, and not the 3 years at Montana State, but 16 where you're off the field at UNLV, 17 where you take your first room as a corners coach at Sacramento State, and then what's next year? 18. You get the job there in Montana. In 3 years, you're in 3 majorly different situations and all this kind of stuff. Just what were those 3 years like? Getting acclimated to the profession, because that is a part of it. Just transitions and tough phone calls and deep discussions with the significant other. Well, how would you describe that time for yourself and your wife?
It was wild.
Yeah.
It was wild because I felt at that time I thought I was going to move every year.
Right.
Again, going back to 16 to 17 to 18, UNLV, Sacramento State to Montana, it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen in 19? It's going to happen in 20, 21.
Yeah.
And I just felt that, number one, we couldn't buy a house. There was no way we're going to buy a house because you just never know what's going to happen the next year.
Mm-hmm.
And then also having that conversation with my wife, because the cool thing is when we went to Montana, we were only 8 hours away from Seattle. That's where my wife's from.
Okay.
So we were close to family, so it made sense to us. On top of the fact that, working with Coach Alk and the others and working with family. But I don't know. I was still trying to understand how this profession worked.
Yeah.
And I still am. Everything's still new to me, to be honest with you. But I knew I could take every day, just one day at a time, step by step, and just worry about where my feet were. And if another opportunity came about, it does. If not, I was good where I was. But just making that decision, I had to make sure I was working with good people, because ultimately that's what it's all about.
Yeah, and I want to hit that question a little bit. Me and you both have the connection to Todd Berry, as you play for him at UNLV. I played for him at Army, I coached for him at Louisiana Monroe, and obviously I worked for him here at the American Football Coaches Association. And when I first joined that staff, my first semester, I was a graduate assistant, but I was promoted. And this is the guy that, from my point of view, I played for him and looked him in the eyes and said, yes, sir. And, hey, Mario, go run through the wall. And I went and did it for him, right? And as a GA, it was kind of the same thing. You need a coffee, you need this, you need that. Coach, I got you. And then all of a sudden you're in this room where, you're 1/10 of the decisions of things that are going on, and you have to stand up and say, Coach, I think, this, that, or the other. Did you ever have any of that when you're looking at these guys these were your coaches, you know what I mean, before they were ever your coworkers and friends and things like that? These were the guys that did you struggle at all, kind of being a young guy in the room with a bunch of guys that you looked up to at some point?
Yeah. To be quite honest with you, I did struggle with that.
Yeah.
Especially the first year at Montana. It was just understanding that, yes, I did GA for Coach Alk and actually our offensive coordinator and our defensive coordinator too. But it came a point in time where Coach Alk came in my office and said, hey, we value your opinion. And I did not bring you here to be a yes man. And at the end of the day, without any disagreement, there's no discussion. So if there's something that does not, make sense or you don't necessarily agree with, speak up.
Yeah.
Because again, I didn't hire you just to say yes. I hired you because I know you're a good football coach. We believe in you. And once I had that conversation with Coach, I was good.
Yeah.
And I knew I could speak up in staff meetings. But I will say initially, it took me some time to really feel comfortable with expressing myself.
Yeah.
Because again, yes sir, no sir, and here's your coffee and whatever you need, Coach, and that's it.
That's right.
But he did a really nice job of saying, hey, we brought you here for a reason, buddy.
But Coach, I appreciate you sharing that, because that was something I did struggle with, and it took me some time. At whatever point I said something and realized that people did value my opinion, and it became super easy after that. But that is something that happens in the profession. Most you probably never said that out loud. I would imagine to anybody other than your wife, and that's just the kind of discussion, things that don't happen in this profession. They see you doing well, think you probably never, had the type of insecurities, at least from that role. And there's a bunch of coaches that get promoted and GA on their staff and get promoted full time, and they struggle with that deal. So once again, I appreciate you sharing that. Now let's move forward now to your current role. You get the job at Kent State in 21. So I kind of start that one again, like I started all these other ones. How did that come about? Clearly a jump to the FBS level, which is huge. The conversation you had with Coach Howe, what went down on that deal?
Yeah. I again, another random occurrence. Just kind of was sitting at my desk getting ready for a position meeting, and then I got a text from the defense coordinator at the time, Coach Kaufman, and asked me if I would be interested in the cornerback's job at Kent State. I said yes. And before I went to the position meeting, I let Coach House know immediately. I did not wait. I did not want him to be blindsided. So, again, we just had that relationship, and I think that's important. As you go through this as a position coach, you never want to blindside your head coach.
Yeah.
As soon as I got a text message, I let Coach House know right away. Went to the position meeting and then came back, had a phone interview with Coach Kaufman, was all good there. And then the next day I talked to Coach Lewis. He gave me a call and said, hey, we'll let you know if we want to bring you up for an interview. And then we'll be in touch. And then they called me the next day and got me scheduled, and they flew me out and I interviewed, and I ended up getting the job. And kind of how it all went down was, at Montana, we were running the Aztec defense. It's Rocky Long's defense. We were doing really good things there. And I know Coach Kaufman and the defense staff at Kent State had been clinicking with Zach Arnett at Mississippi State.
Yeah. And
I spent some time with Zach because he would come up to Montana and clinic us. And, Coach House was at San Diego State for 3 years with the San Diego State staff. And Zach was the one that actually put me up for the Kent State job. And so that's how it all worked out. And again, I came out here and I interviewed for it. And Coach Lewis gave me a call the next day and offered me the job. And I said, I'm all in. And again, as soon as I got the call, I let Coach House know. And you know how it is. It's somebody that you love.
Yeah,
it's always tough to leave. But he understood and said, hey, man, if you ever need anything, let me know. And we still stay in touch. I talked to Coach not too long ago, and he was happy for me.
That's awesome, man. Well, I spent a lot of time talking about the discussion between you and the different coaches in these situations, and you may mention a few times of discussions between you and your wife. But now this one is at least all those were on the West Coast, proximity to kind of at least the alma mater or Seattle, to where your wife is from. All of a sudden you're traveling a little bit further east. How does this dialogue go down with the wife? And what is she doing in this whole process? Is she working? What's going on in the family dynamics?
Yeah. So at the time, she was actually working at Advanced Imaging. It's an MRI place in Missoula. Worked with great people, and I just talked to her about the move, and I had to explain to her that Kent is 40 minutes south of Cleveland, Ohio. We both had never been to Ohio before. I'm from Dallas, Texas. Yeah. She's from Seattle, Washington. And, we just decided it was the best move for us. Obviously for another opportunity to coach at the FBS level. Yeah. It was a little bit more lucrative in terms of, finances.
Absolutely.
So that helps out. That always helps out a little bit.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hard conversation at all. I just told her that I felt that the head coach was a really good man, and Coach Lewis. I felt that the defensive coordinator was awesome. My time spent with him, and there was a young defensive staff. They all sat in the interview, so I got a chance to interact with them during the interview and also during lunch. And I felt really good about the situation. And so, again, my wife is a soldier, and she sacrificed so much for us. And these conversations that you have when you go to job, they were never tough for us because, again, that's a conversation that we had when we first started dating. And I told her this is the opportunity that I wanted. This is my goal. And she's always been all in and said, okay, honey, I'm ready to go. And we'll pack up everything and we'll move.
That's what it's all about, man. Well, I'm happy that worked out for you. And you had an exciting little stint there. Pitched a shutout as the interim DC in that year. So I can only imagine how, obviously something had to happen for you to be the interim DC. So just talk a little bit about how you went from corners to calling a game.
Yeah, it was crazy. We just finished up the game. It was a matching game against Central Michigan, and our DC got let go. And so we go into a staff meeting, and Coach Lewis decides to make me the interim DC. And that was something that I've always wanted to do. I want to be a defensive coordinator. And I'm blessed and grateful that Coach Lewis believed in me to give me that opportunity to call it. Now, that first game, you pitch a shutout, you think it's easy. And it's not.
It's not.
It's not at all, because I tell you what, the next week, they hung about 40 on us. And it's the polar opposite of what happened the week before. But it was a great opportunity. I also knew that, you're never going to be prepared until that moment comes. You think you have all the answers. You think you're ready to rock and roll. And then when you have that opportunity, it's just like, wow, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
Okay, you got to think about that. It's all about the foundation of the defense and how do you make adjustments within the series? How do you make adjustments in between series and all those different things? You also have to manage personalities. You have to manage your staff. And you're also the final decision maker on that side of the ball. That's something that I've never had to do.
Yeah.
Especially being young, kind of going back to, your question of, okay, now I struggle with speaking up because I was working for my mentor. Now it's like, okay, now you have to make these decisions.
Yeah.
And you have to believe in those decisions too. But it was a great experience. Obviously I didn't get the DC job, but again, I know the next time I have an opportunity to call it, I'll be ready to go for sure. But it was awesome, great experience.
Absolutely, I'm kind of thinking for you here. I would imagine, whether you got the DC job or not, just being able to kind of dip your toe in the water before you jumped in has to be advantageous to some point of view for you to be able to go back and say, okay, this is the stuff that I need to have a game plan next time this opportunity arises. These are the things I got to see firsthand. Most OCs or DCs in their first time, they're going to have to go do it the next week and the next week and the next week. And, they're going to learn a bunch of lessons, but you're kind of able to take that and internalize it. Now, before I let you go here, man, I want to ask you one last question. I love this podcast that we put on because, we just get coaches from all over, and these, most other professions, there's kind of a cookie cutter. You got to get this major. You got to go do 2 years here and blah, 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 blah. And it's just profession is so crazy to where you can have a story as unique as yours and have somebody that has never left the same place they've always been at, and you're making a transition every 3 times in 3 years at one point in your career. What has been the biggest piece of growth that you've seen from the 2017 Sacramento State corners coach to the, current Kent State secondary coach? What, whether it's from a coaching standpoint, X and O knowledge standpoint, where has been your biggest growth over these 6 years, leading the room?
Again, I think it kind of goes back to, just being the example for your kids, and being consistent. I think that we're all going to grow as coaches, X's and O's. We all want to be better. I think we can't ask our kids to get better and be better and to grow if we don't do that ourselves. That's why we go to the convention. That's why we have professional development, so on and so forth. But I think it's all about who the kids are looking up to and being a great man day in and day out and being consistent with that. I think that's the biggest growth for me from being a young coach to now. It's, okay, how do I make sure I am that shining example for these kids each and every day? How do I get around these guys and come in with unbelievable energy, with a smile on my face? Because I can't ask them to do that if I'm not doing it myself. And that way you put pressure on yourself. And it's an everyday thing. And then ultimately it becomes who you are.
Absolutely.
So I think that's the biggest thing for me is just from being a young coach to being a little bit older coach now. Just being consistent for these kids because they need it. And I know with the transfer portal and people say it's a business, but there's still a human element to it.
Absolutely.
And the parents, they drop their kids off to you, and they want to know that their son's going to be taken care of. And I think that falls on us as football coaches to make sure we're that shining example for their kids.
No doubt, Coach. Well, I appreciate what you do. I know those players for you and the ones before the ones you got now, all appreciate what you've done for them. I just want to wish you best of luck. And before I let you go, I would love for you to drop your Twitter account so coaches can, if they got any more questions about your career path or, X's and O's or whatever, they can reach out to you, drop you a DM, and keep up with your career.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's at Coach Cox _GF. Coach Cox, no space between Cox and _GF. Coach Cox _GF.
All right. We'll make sure to link that in the show notes, make it easy for everybody to find. And, man, best of luck to you and look forward to seeing you in Nashville in 24, okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Coach.
CoachComm has been delivering tough headsets for tough teams for more than 31 years. It's why 97% of FBS teams and thousands of high schools across the country rely on CoachComm. Get the best for your team. Visit CoachComm.com for more info.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Inside the Headset, presented by CoachComm. If you'd like to learn more about this week's episode, head over to AFCA.com. There, you can access every episode and find corresponding show notes. Remember, you can catch every episode of Inside the Headset presented by CoachComm on wherever you get your podcasts, including Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. While you're there, we'd love for you to take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Your feedback helps us improve and grow. Keep up with the latest news by following us on social media. Connect with us at Inside the Headset, and remember to tag us when you share your favorite episodes. For more updates on all things AFCA, be sure to follow the @WeAreAFCA social media accounts. If you're not a part of the AFCA community yet, visit AFCA.com to join thousands of NFL, college, and high school coaches nationwide and across the globe. Elevate your coaching game with an AFCA membership. You'll gain exclusive access to the annual AFCA convention, magazine, digital library, and AFCA Insider email. Stay up to date with the latest stories and news on the AFCA website. More than just a convention, the AFCA offers continuous education, guidance, networking, and more. Celebrate the past and shape the future with the AFCA. It's about fostering exceptional coaches who create outstanding teams and even better individuals. Invest in your skills and make a lasting impact today by engaging with the AFCA. Your journey starts here.